Do you want more success, more growth, more results? Then it's time for the Boundless Success Accelerator from the Modern Observer Group. This isn't your average coaching program. It's where top performers come to dominate. Weekly group sessions, on-demand coaching, a community that's got your back, and a power-packed library of tools to supercharge your business and career. No more excuses, no more waiting. Get in, level up, and start building the life you've been dreaming about. Visit us at modernobserver.com/boundlesssuccess to join today. Let's get you to the next level. Hello, and welcome to the Success Showcase, the podcast that helps you succeed in your business, life, and career. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin from the Modern Observer Group, and with me, as always, is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing this week?
I'm doing fantastic. Back from my vacay in Scotland. And how do we do this again, Eric? It's been a long time.
It has been a few weeks, but I assume you had a wonderful time in Scotland.
Oh, it was unavoidable. Amazing country. People are even more amazing. As I was telling you both before, the signs don't say welcome to Scotland. It says we welcome you to Scotland. That says it all. I highly recommend visiting.
It does. I'm glad you had a good time and glad to have you back. And speaking of people we're glad to have, we have a very special guest this week. Chelsea Thomas has created a nonprofit called Family in Flight, and she is helping families of active servicemen. And I'll let her tell you a little more about it. But Chelsea, introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hello, and thanks for having me today, gentlemen. I'm excited to be here. A little bit about me is first and foremost, I'm a mom to four kids and three fur babies. So we have a very busy house. There's always something going on or somebody or something getting hurt, but that's beside the point. And I am, like you mentioned, the founder of Family in Flight, which is a military nonprofit that helps families who are geo-baching, which a lot of people don't know that term. And so I was actually unaware of it for my first 2 years of being an active geo-batcher. And so it's just when military family members, specifically spouses, are stationed in two different places. So, for example, like I'm in Florida with my kids, and my husband is in Mississippi. And, we've been living apart for 3 years almost now. And so we're here to help provide resources, travel grants, support groups, fun 5Ks, all the different things to help bring awareness to this topic because it's not something that's talked about much, and then to also provide support for those who are in this lovely situation of living apart.
Well, we're thrilled to have you here. So, yeah, as you said, even you doing the geobatching weren't familiar with the term. So, tell our listeners a little bit about the difficulties that military families have when they have to geobatch.
Oh, that is a very long list. I don't know where to begin on that one. No, I mean, to start, you have two homes, and so a lot of people, some people and some families will choose to live on base, but that still provides its own issues because you still have a full house elsewhere that your family is living in. And, things start deteriorating at one house or maybe on base or, just all of the things that come with being a homeowner or even a renter and just having the responsibility of doing it yourself. You have the travel. So for me, I used to fly all the time, but then of course with flight prices increasing aggressively over the last, year and a half or so, we've resorted to driving. So now I drive every week for 10 and a half hours, one way up. And then a week later, I drive 10 and a half hours on the way back. And, that makes its own issues as well, in terms of one time I woke up and there was a flat tire. So that, skirted that trip and made it a little bit more difficult to get to Mississippi. So there's all sorts of different struggles and things that we come across, especially for those who are raising kids. For myself, we have, like I said, I'm a mom of four. Two of them live more full time with me. And so it's just the balancing act of bedtimes by myself after I've worked, a full 8-hour work day and making dinner and running the kids to whatever events they're doing or sports programs. And by the end of the day, I am exhausted and have had no time to myself, and my house is a mess. And, what do? You just push on through. And so that's why we wanted to provide that support because it's such a unique situation. It's not necessarily like a deployment where there is an end in sight. And you have a lot of deployment groups support out there. So, you can reach out and chat with somebody about how you're struggling with deployment, but you have an end date. Whereas geo-baching, you don't necessarily have an end date. Like my husband and I are doing this indefinitely at this point. So it makes it, there is no light at the end of the tunnel quite yet for some of us who are in this position.
Yeah,
So,
I had never heard of this before. Awareness is the word that comes to mind
mm,
right off the top because when Eric said that we were going to be interviewing you today, I said, wow, but awareness and then obviously this is going on. So, I mean, what you're doing, I think is fantastic. It's brilliant. And, not only offering the services, but the support groups and so on and so forth. I mean, obviously you're a uniter and you're also serving a whole lot of people in a whole lot of different ways. And I'm sure that you have a lot of wonderful help. I mean, you do have a really lovely section on your website as far as everybody that is helping you out. But, you know, tell us about how things are going. I mean, obviously you've been doing this for a little while, and obviously you're going to let us know how we can help you out moving ahead too. So, but
yeah,
yeah,
thanks. And that is really kind of where I came to be because, again, I did this for 2 years without knowing that that's what I was doing. And so I was like, well, if I don't know it, then I'm sure so many other people are also unaware that this is the position that they're in. And it has happened where I've, thrown it in a military group or been on a podcast and there's somebody going, hey, we had no clue that that's what we were, the position that we were in. And so it makes it, you know, that's the first step in all of this is the support and the awareness to let people know, hey, one, you're not alone. Like this is very much a unique situation, but there's a lot of us out there. Like Syracuse University and Blue Star Families actually did a survey back in 2018. So it's been a while, but they did a survey and 4% of military families back in 2018 were already geobaching. So you can only assume that that number has grown, quite a bit at this point with the way that economy is going, the way that job stability is going, because sometimes it's just a spouse who stays behind because they have a great job and they're not willing to risk moving to a new location and hoping that they find something that is as good or better, so they choose, hey, I'm going to stay back here for my career while you go do things on your career and we'll, get together when we can. And so, yeah, I mean, we have a great team behind me. I would not be able to do this without them. Like, I was very strategic in picking my board, and we really laid the groundwork and the website and social media prior to really doing any fundraising or projects. We didn't even open applications or support groups until this past May. So, 8, 10 months in, we really just kind of sat there and said as a board, what is the need and how can we fill that gap? And so that's where we came into play of, okay, we initially started this with we are going to provide travel grants because I was frustrated at how expensive everything was. But at the end of the day, when you're talking to people, they just needed support. And it wasn't necessarily financial support, it was emotional support and resources because, like I'm in Florida and I don't always necessarily have somebody to watch my kids, and so I have a work event and I got to figure it out and who do you trust and who do you not trust and all of those different factors that a lot of people don't think about on a regular basis are huge factors for me and my family because we do have to plan around kids. We do, it's essentially like single parenting with support from, family members afar who are like, hey, we're here if you need anything outside of actually watching your children, And so it's, you do what you have to do. And so that's, again, yeah, I think that this support really is where we sort of pivoted back in the spring to make it more known that you're not alone because I felt extremely alone and I was really struggling with my journey and we still had many years to go. At this point, we were 2 years in and I was like, this is dumb and I hate it, you know? I'm like, I love you, my husband. You are wonderful and you're worth doing this for, but man, there are some really hard days.
Yeah, I've spoken to a number of active duty military, and very often there is a phrase that I have heard so many times it's almost cliche, but it's true. The most difficult job in the military is a military spouse,
Mhm.
and that's just standard when you're actually with your husband. What kinds of questions have come up from the folks that are approaching you? What kind of support are they needing?
So a lot of times it's, what are some communication tips that you have, because that's the biggest factor in this. And my husband hates the phone. Like from day one, hates being on the phone, hates a FaceTime call. Like that is the bane of his existence. So going into this, he and I had to have some very open and honest conversations about, hey, this is the only way that we're going to be able to be connected when we're not together. So like we got to find a compromise. So a lot of the questions are, what are some communication tips that you have? Or what are, how do you keep your mental health and keep your sanity as a priority when you're doing all of these things by yourself as a military spouse, because we can't just leave on a Saturday when our spouse is home to go grocery shopping alone. We can't just leave to go get our nails done. We can't, like, we don't have that luxury. It's very strategic. Okay, the kids are in school. Let me go on my 1 hour lunch break in between and it's how do we make this work? And so those have been sort of the biggest questions of how. Like it's how in whatever capacity. How do you deal with being a single parent? How do you deal with house stuff? I can't tell you how many times I've like tried to fix a toilet and I just end up calling my neighbor's husband to be like, "Hi, I need you to come over and fix this," or, an electrical problem. I'm like, I don't know. Here's a fun story. Perfect example. Our roof needed to be blown off, and my husband wasn't coming home for a while because typically, whenever he does come home, he'll blow off the roof for me, and we're pretty set until the next time. But this was like a really long gap, so I was like, "How hard can blowing a roof be? Like, I can climb up there, yeah." So I put my little ladder up, and I got the leaf blower, got up there, and it died within a few minutes. Didn't do much. And I said, okay, let me like climb down the ladder. Well, my ladder got all finagled and weird, and I was stuck up on my roof for an hour until my neighbor picked up the phone. And I didn't even have my cell phone. I just had to call on my watch and hope that it connected to the service from my phone through the roof. And so I had to call them and be like, hi, I'm stuck on my roof because I tried to be independent. Can you come help me get down? And they were like, what are you doing? But it's things like that where you're like, my HOA is going to yell at me if I don't blow off my roof, but I don't have anyone to do it? So it's just, I know it's a broad answer, but the biggest question is how. And then it's followed up with, so many subcategories of that how. And as, spouses, we figured out some tips and tricks to help each other. But for the most part, we're all sort of like, well, just kind of winging it with a little prayer on the side sometimes, hoping for the best.
That's actually very interesting, because when I was looking through your website and we were talking, my impression was, well, sure, there's all of the emotional stress, the stress of raising kids, all the it never dawned on me that just household, maintenance would come up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
never really does, which is fair. And I don't think that it really hit me until about 6 months in, and I was like, oh shoot, there's all these things that he used to do that now I have to do, or we have to wait until he comes back home, which that's not a set thing? So it's definitely a fun issue that a lot of us deal with on a regular basis. And the other thing too that's very different about geo-baching versus like a deployment or, a short-term like assignment or a TDY type of trip is that with all of those, especially deployments, comes support from your squadron. So when your spouse deploys, the spouses who are left home have a support group. So there's a lot of other, military members who are like, "Hey, we can come help mow the grass." Or they have free childcare watching days or nights for the spouse to go get stuff done, or a car wash for free, or groceries, or dinner, or all of these things while your spouse is deployed to help get you through the deployment because it's so hard. Well, we don't have that with geo-batching. We're not tied, typically, we're not tied to the base that we are located because our military service member has moved and that's our new home base. So,
Right. So your home base would be in Mississippi, but because you're in Florida, you can't take advantage of any services that they have.
correct. And now I can go, shop at the commissary and get a few bucks off my groceries in Florida, but I don't get those deployment perks. And that's where we're trying to fill the gap in the areas we can. We can't always deliver meals wherever you are, but we can be there to support you from a distance.
And of course, you had mentioned, you have a house in Mississippi, you have a house in Florida. Most people make the assumption that, oh, you're a military family, you live on base, and the military takes care of all the costs. That's not the case for geobatching, is it?
Oh no. And honestly, for a lot of military in general, that's not the case. So, military families, yes, we do get a base housing allowance. Everybody typically gets it across the board. It's obviously different amounts per rank, per family members, all the different things. So we do get that. However, if we were to try and live on base in Mississippi, I think it's like a 9 month wait list right now. So when you get your orders, typically you don't have even 9 months from the date you get orders to the date you arrive. It's much, much quicker than that. You could get orders in April and expect to be reporting in sometime summer. And so a lot of these families, even if there is base housing as an option, you're stuck on the wait list. So you have to find something temporarily. Well, then that's a bummer because you're moving all your stuff temporarily into a home to then have to move it again onto base housing. Well, so we decided, okay, we're just going to purchase a home in Mississippi to make things easier. Well, that's great and all, but the base housing allowance that we have doesn't even cover the one mortgage of the Mississippi house, let alone the mortgage of Florida and Mississippi combined. And on top of that, we have double electric, double water, double like all the doubles. And then, there's things like Netflix where they just came out being like, you can't have multiple households unless you pay extra. And I'm like, what about us? Like,
Right.
again, geo-batching, like that's not something that Netflix probably even thought about, but my husband and I are one family unit, but we just happen to live in two separate states due to our, and I'm sure there's also other jobs out there that have that same problem. But, in terms of geo-batching, it's little things like that where you're like, what the heck, Netflix?
Yeah, and that's something that's important to bring up. We're talking about all of this in terms of the military, but it's not unique to the military. I know a number of people who, because of their jobs and their spouse had, got another job and it was, too good an opportunity, the money was too good, and they live in separate states, separate areas. Some of them will spend weekends together, some will get together once a month even. So this is something that's actually going on in American life, not just in the military. And it does bring a lot of situations that you don't immediately think of.
Yeah. Well, and for us too, like we are lucky with, the reason I stayed back is because I co-parent my kids with their dad. And so we lucked out because I have a week on with my children and then a week off with my kids. So I get to see my husband every other week. But that's not always the case, especially when people have multiple kids and they're working full time. And, there's a lot of moving parts. Like there's a family that we helped this summer and she has two kids, works, full time. and she gets to see her husband like maybe once a quarter. The kids get to see their dad maybe once a quarter. Like that's a bummer, like and I know that I'm lucky in my situation, but that's not the case for everybody. And a lot of times people are going much, much longer time in between because that's the only option that they have. And they have to wait for a holiday weekend where it's one extra day that you get to spend with your, significant other. And so it really is just, I mean, again, we focus on military, but like you said, it's not just a military problem at this point.
Right. And we've talked with folks before about the stress of being in the military and all this. And this is just an added stress. I mean, imagine having a family that you can only see once a quarter and then maybe only for a long weekend or a week at most. The stress that adds to people can be very detrimental. And I know you guys have support groups. Have you dealt with folks, who are coping with that?
Oh, yes. So that's a huge, huge issue across the board, and that's where I was saying that I know that I'm lucky in that situation because that's not the case. Like, we have talked with people who go 6 months without seeing each other, or they go, like I said, that once a quarter, and it really is hard. Like, it is a hard pill to swallow, but also, like, if you're a military spouse, you might I mean, some jobs don't have the best PTO policy, and you have to really be strategic about it. And so, if it doesn't work with your PTO, you're risking either losing a job or not seeing your spouse. Like, what are you supposed to do in that situation? Like that is less than ideal when it comes down to it. But yeah, I mean, I now would say most of our support groups are just essentially talking about us being stressed in the positions that we are. Most of us are, we've had just females on the call, so we're all moms, all dealing with kids, and just that in itself, plus working full time, plus not seeing your spouse, and being a military, spouse on top of all of that with all the other stuff that it comes with. It's just, and that's why we always preach like therapy is a huge, huge portion of mine and my husband's success. Like, I don't think we'd be where we are today without therapy because I mean, you just need like an outside point of view sometimes to be like, yes, this sucks, but here's the solution.
Yeah, it is very difficult. Coping with stress as a whole is, not easy. And we talk a lot about that on this podcast, where we're focused on mindset and, perspective. And I think the folks that are dealing with geo-baching, I mean, that's a whole different perspective. I mean, this is not something that they necessarily even signed up for. I'm sure most of the folks you're dealing with didn't know this was going to be the situation when the spouse went into the military, certainly not when they got married.
Yeah, and I think that that is also something that, like, I mean, I can't tell you how many times that I have heard, well, you signed up for this life. And I'm like, did I though? Like, did
Nah.
I sign up to live 10 and a half hours apart for an indefinite amount of time? No, I signed up for deployments. I signed up for TDYs. I signed up for moving. I signed up for all these other issues and problems that the military has in and of itself, but I did not necessarily sign up for this whole geo-batching life. Now, speaking of perspective, I have tried to change my perspective on it and do something with this, and that helps me get through, but not everybody has a nonprofit or the ability to do this, to be able to chat and, talk with other people. But yeah, I mean, the whole, well, you signed up for this situation, I genuinely, like you said, don't think it applies to geobatching. Everything else, yes, you know what or at least you should know what you're getting into when you're dating and marrying a military person. But geobatching maybe should be on the table now as a conversation when you are dating that military service member to be like, hey, let's chat about it, what we would do if this comes up and we are put in the position of potentially geobatching, because it's becoming more and more pertinent in life.
Yeah. Now I don't think you've been doing this too long. I mean, it's relatively new, but have you found other people in this situation from around the country reaching out to you, interested in doing what you're doing too? I mean, because obviously you're setting up a template for services and support and so on and so forth, that if all of a sudden it went viral to everybody who was doing this and everybody was aware of geo-batching in the first place, what a huge difference it could make. And so are you anywhere with that, or have you been approached? Tell me about that side of things, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are learning about it today, and a lot of people who are probably interested in doing it.
Yeah, so I haven't been approached yet, but hey, I will happily share. We have worked with a few deployment groups and we've sort of talked about this, how there's a lot of deployment nonprofits out there, but we're all here willing to share the wealth of those who need support during deployment. So if somebody else is out there and wants to jump on board and help out with this, like by all means, give me a call. But and I think too, like we are still so new, so we're still learning the ropes and we're still learning. I just had a call earlier this afternoon about all the different military programs, specifically for spouses, specifically for women, who are tied to the military, and all of these things that I can't tell you how many times I've Googled potential opportunities, and then none of these ever came up on my list, and they're huge organizations. So it's a lot of times by word of mouth too, that we are located across the US. I will say that we have representatives in 7 different states, so that's super exciting. But yeah, we haven't been approached by anyone quite yet. Maybe I got to get that formula down so that if anyone does, we can help them out.
Well, you're looking at our host here, who's very, very well connected, and I'm sure can help you out as far as connecting people.
Listen, I'm here for it. We have learned in the military world, it's all about, I mean, in general too, but especially with military, it's all about those connections
Yep.
when it comes
Yes,
down
it
to stuff
is.
like this. Yeah.
So you've been running the nonprofit for a little bit. You've been geo-batching for a while. What have you learned to help you with geo-batching that you really wish somebody would have told you when you started this?
Ooh, that is a great question. Um, I would say one, communication styles. So, like, take one of those dumb little quizzes online to find out your communication style because, oh my gosh, that has helped my husband and I so much to learn the different formats of communication. Um, to give a lot of grace and understanding because especially when you're military and you're a spouse, you kind of get the like you're forced into flexibility. But with geo batching, it's also very different because you're not home with, oh, we had a flight change, so now we can't talk. No big deal. I'll see you when you get home. That could have been your 1 hour of talking time, and now it's completely taken over by a flight that your spouse had no control over or some work position that they have to do. And so just being understanding. And then my favorite piece of advice that our therapist gave us right before we went into this was called a vent container. And I tell everybody this. This is the best thing ever told to my husband and I, and it has saved a lot of fights and arguments while being long distance. And what you do is when you are in an argument, so there's been many times where I'll be coming up for the weekend and he will be put on a cross country trip, meaning he has to take a student Friday, Saturday, Sunday, somewhere outside of Mississippi for all of their flights. And so I'm supposed to be coming up for the weekend, and now he's going to be gone for 3 days. So, but again, he doesn't have a choice. It's his job, and that's what we know, right? So, in that situation, it would be, "Hey, vent container." And he would go, "Okay," knowing that I'm about to just spew whatever I feel like saying without consequence. He's not trying to fix it. He's not going to be offended by it when I say your job sucks. He's not, like it's a very big safe space. And so it allows the spouse to be frustrated on either side. He has also done it with me with my work schedule because sometimes my work schedule is nuts and we don't get to talk because of that. And so you do this vent container, you get to say whatever you want, you get to do whatever you want in that space. It's a safe space. The person then can follow up with, "Do you want help or were you just venting?" So it allows for that person to go, "No, I don't want your help. I just wanted to say what I wanted to say," because a lot of people just want to fix it. And then whenever you're done with this, you have to say vent container closed. And that signifies that whatever I say next, you can be offended about, like there There is, freedom and flexibility in that, but it has saved us so much because he knows I'm not mad at him. Because mainly, let's be real, it's me using this vent container for his job. But he knows I'm not upset with him. Whereas prior to all of this, before we learned that, he would always feel like I was upset with him. And I'm like, no, it's just your job. And he was like, but I am my job, you know? And so that has saved us. And we have actually passed this along to so many people. And we've gotten feedback going, that is the best advice we have ever heard. And it has saved so many of our arguments. So that's what I would like to say to everybody in life in general, honestly. Everybody can use that tip.
Yeah, that is a fantastic concept. I love that. That's
Uh-huh.
That's I'm
Yeah.
not the string.
Yeah.
yeah.
See? It's just so helpful to be like, and she was like, I'm a visual person. So she was like, you're opening the container, putting everything in it, you're closing it, and then you're done. Like that's the visual representation of that's that. And you can reopen it later, but you have to, again, vent container open and vent container closed. Those are very important.
Very cool. All right, we
Mhm.
are just about at the end of our time. So if somebody wants to get more information about Family in Flight, how can they do so?
So we have a very beautiful website at www.familyinflight.org. There you can find all of our resources, information about monthly support groups. All of our social handles are on there too, but you can also just find us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Family in Flight as well. And so, yeah, we would love to chat with you if you guys are in this position, need help, or if you know somebody, pass us along so that we can go support them.
Fantastic. Thanks for being here. So, Chip, what do you think is the big takeaway for this week?
Now, first of all, awareness, and then obviously the support and the resources that you are providing as far as the services go. But I loved two things: the communication tips that you talked about, and then the vent container. Because the bottom line is, whether it's the military or whatever other situation you're in, we're all on life's journey together. And we got to assume when we first had not got married, we are using the goodness that we were all created with, which is just loving kindness.
Hmm.
And these are ways to get you back to that and just refocused. So, as far as takeaways and learning that, to all of you folks that are out there, experiencing what you're experiencing, but just going through life, communicate with each other, number one. And number two, I love that vent container idea. And then just let it go because obviously you feel so much better and the pulse is down and everything else after that's done. So that's fabulous takeaway. But thank you so much for doing what you're doing. And I hope the word does spread and the phone rings off the hook so you can help a whole lot of other people too.
Hey, I hope so too. And I appreciate you both having me on your podcast today.
Yes, I'm so glad you could come. I think for me, the big takeaway, I mean, yes, the communication, and I love that vent container concept, but I think the big takeaway for me is something that we've sort of been skirting around. It's that people don't know that this is going on. And that is so important for people to realize that you had said, oh, well, didn't you sign up for this? Like, you never know what somebody else is going through. And you should always keep that in mind before spouting off or judging or, thinking you understand. Open those communication lines and actually find out what's going on first. And I think that's so important. And, a great way to find out is opening that vent container and letting people vent. I think that is a great concept. So, yes, thanks for being here. You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch every episode at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. We'll see you then.